All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack what is, honestly, a high-stakes, ancient political thriller. We're talking secret identities, assassination plots, and some incredible against-all-odds courage. This is the story of how a marginalized group navigated absolute power and managed to survive in a vast, unpredictable empire. This instantly thrusts us into the terrifying, life-or-death reality of the Persian court we are about to enter. We're looking at a world ruled by rigid laws and unalterable decrees, where even a slight misstep, or simply appearing before the ruler without a direct invitation, carries the ultimate punishment. Section 1. Captives in a Vast Empire, the Geopolitical Stage of Susa. So, to put things into perspective chronologically, the Jewish people had already endured the devastating destruction of Jerusalem, lived through a lengthy captivity in Babylon, and then watched the Persians conquer their captors. And that brings us to the present day in our story, where they're living as subjects in the powerful Persian capital city of Susa, a sprawling, dangerous empire that's a long, long way from home. Moving on to Section 2, the rise of Queen Esther, from captive to royalty. Okay, so the Persian king, Ahasuerus, banishes his queen for disobeying him, which kicks off this massive, kingdom-wide search for a replacement. Enter our protagonist, an orphaned Jewish girl. Her wise cousin, Mordecai, directs her to take on the name Esther. Now, while that sounds a lot like the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, in the tongue of her own people, it actually means hidden. And that's absolutely crucial, because she is explicitly told to keep her true Jewish identity completely under wraps in this incredibly dangerous court. Her rapid ascent here is just staggering. I mean, think about it. She's forcibly taken from her home, placed under the custody of the king's eunuch, and put through these rigorous, prescribed treatments with myrrh. But her unique courage eventually wins the king over. She's summoned to his chambers and, against all odds, this obscure captive is crowned queen of all Persia and Media. And the whole time, her true heritage remains a closely guarded secret. Section 3. Haman's Plot for Annihilation. The Clash of Egos and Faiths. This is where the tension just skyrockets. We see this massive friction between Mordecai's steadfast faith and the toxic, fragile vanity of a ruthless official named Haman. Mordecai, who, by the way, had already proved his loyalty by uncovering a plot to assassinate the king, absolutely refuses to bow down to Haman. He reserves that kind of absolute submission only for the Lord. Well, Haman is so infuriated by this bruised ego that he decides killing just Mordecai isn't enough. No, he wants to annihilate Mordecai's entire people. And think about this number, because it represents pure, calculated malice. Haman literally offers 10,000 talents of silver out of his own pocket to the king's treasury. Why? Because he knows the king is going to worry about lost tax revenue if an entire group of subjects suddenly disappears. Basically, Haman is willing to pay an astronomical sum of wealth just to buy permission for a slaughter. And tragically, Haman's rhetoric works. The king gives him the authority to write a chilling decree, explicitly ordering the empire to, quote, destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month. And to make matters worse, this was sealed with the king's ring, transforming this genocidal plot into a terrifyingly absolute, completely unalterable Persian law. Which brings us to Section 4, for such a time, a deadly gamble. When Mordecai learns about this horrifying decree, he puts on sackcloth and ashes right outside the palace gates. He sends this urgent, truly iconic message to Esther, reminding her that hiding in the palace is not going to protect her from a law aimed at all Jews. He challenges her with a powerful thought. Perhaps she was placed in this position of royalty for this exact, terrifying moment. Now, Esther's strategy here is incredibly calculated and high risk. She doesn't just run in panicking. First, she asks all her people to fast for 3 days. Then, she breaks the ultimate law by approaching the king entirely unsummoned. But she plays the court politics perfectly. She invites the king and Haman to a private banquet before finally exposing the plot to save her people. Just imagine the psychological intensity of that moment. Esther is risking immediate execution simply by stepping into the king's presence without an invitation. Her life entirely depends on a single gesture. If the king holds out the golden scepter, she lives. Her resolve is perfectly captured in her famous statement, "If I perish, I perish." But right before Esther springs her trap, there's this brilliant, almost unbelievable, ironic reversal. The king can't sleep one night and realizes Mordecai was never actually rewarded for saving his life earlier. So he asks Haman how to honor a truly great man. Haman, naturally assuming the king is talking about him, suggests a lavish royal parade with royal robes and a horse. The court reality? The king forces Haman to publicly lead that exact glorious parade for his absolute worst enemy, Mordecai. You really can't make this stuff up.
Right on the heels of that massive humiliation, Haman attends Esther's second banquet. And this is it. Esther finally drops her hidden identity and exposes the genocidal scheme directly to the king, using the exact brutal language from Haman's own decree. She pleads for her own life and the lives of her people, pointing right at a very, very terrified Haman.
The king is absolutely furious. He steps out to clear his head, and when he comes back, he finds Haman pleading with Esther, but he interprets it as an assault. So the villain is promptly executed on the exact same 50-cubit high gallows he had just constructed to hang Mordecai. Poetic justice, right? But as we're about to see, the fight for survival isn't actually over yet. Section 5. Triumph and the First Purim. Reversing the unalterable. Here is the catch. A Persian law sealed with the king's ring literally cannot be revoked, meaning that death sentence on the Jews still technically exists for the 13th of Adar. So the king gives Esther and Mordecai his ring to find a legal loophole, and they issue a brilliant counter-decree, translating it into every language in the empire. It legally grants the Jewish people the right to assemble, arm themselves, and violently defend their lives against anyone who attacks them on that scheduled day of slaughter. And because the Jewish people successfully defended themselves and survived, Queen Esther established a powerful cultural legacy, a brand new festival called Purim. The name actually comes from the word pur, meaning to cast lots, which is exactly what Haman did to determine the date of their destruction. It commemorates the month their absolute despair was turned into joy. Esther decreed that these specific traditions had to be kept to remember how their mourning was transformed into a massive celebration of survival. So every year, on the 14th and 15th of Adar, they were to engage in feasting, exchange gifts, give alms to the poor, and most importantly, remember that incredible reversal of their fate. Now, this victory builds into a much wider historical context. Esther's triumph in Susa ensured the very survival of her people. It literally paved the way for figures like Ezra the scribe, years later, to lead groups back to Jerusalem to preserve the divine word, and for Nehemiah to eventually rebuild the walls of the holy city. Without Esther's courage in the month of Adar, this entire future would have been annihilated. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider. What does it actually mean to risk everything and stand up for your people in the face of absolute power? Esther's journey from a hidden, captive orphan to a queen who put her life on the line poses a timeless question about courage, identity, and speaking truth to power. Think about what it really takes to step out of hiding when the stakes are, quite literally, life and death.